In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here on another episode of Veracity Hill. I'm excited for today's discussion. We'll be talking about the relationship between Christianity and philosophy, and a lot of people have different perspectives on that, and I'm looking forward to being joined by Dr. Tim McGrew of Western Michigan University. He's a contributor to a recent book, 4 Views on Christianity and Philosophy, put out by Zondervan, and so I'm looking forward to getting his perspective and also to tell us a little bit about the different views as well. And I'll be sharing a little bit about my experience and my discussions with people on how they've understood philosophy. I think there's a large misconception out there about what philosophy is, and so we'll be talking about that as well. But before we get into that, we've got a few announcements and then a brief discussion about a movie that Chris and I saw. Chris is here in studio with me. So the brief announcements. So I've mentioned this the past couple weeks, but we have a matching grant opportunity up through the month of December by a generous foundation that's supporting Defenders Media. So if you are interested in supporting the work that Defenders does, and if you're interested in supporting the work that Veracity Hill provides and does for yourself or for others, then please consider giving a donation, whether it's a single one-time or a monthly. Either way, of course, we prefer the monthly for the long-term benefits. But at this point, with this matching grant opportunity, we'll take anything that you are willing to give and what the Lord has put on your heart to give. So it's a great opportunity to support a good Christian apologetics ministry. So we've got that. And if you want to participate in our discussion today, you can give us a call. So the number is 505-2-STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. And also, did you know that you can text into the show? Just text the word Veracity. That's VERACITY to the number 555-888. And once you do that, you'll be subscribed to our list. We don't send a text message out all that often, but it's a great way for you to get in touch with me. You can send me questions that you may have or topic or guest requests. So, again, that's the word Veracity to 555-888. So, a discussion about Rogue One. Chris.
Yes.
We saw this fantastic film. And yes, if you're listening here, this is hopefully going to be a spoiler-free, brief discussion about Rogue One. Because we don't want to spoil any of the good stuff.
Of course not.
You are a bigger Star Wars fan than I am. Fan, which is the short form of the word fanatic.
I believe so.
Yes, and so even some of the characters, even though I like going to the imaginary worlds and exploring them, you had all these characters' names down. I mean, yeah, I thought I just knew the one guy's last name, and I didn't even get that right. So, and maybe we shouldn't spoil that.
Sure.
But what were your thoughts?
My initial thoughts were, as a Star Wars fan, it's a good film to go see. Like, if you drop money on it now, you'll be pleased with what you walk away from. The film's main purpose is to connect to the events leading up to Episode 4.
Yes.
And as you watch the film, you start to realize this literally takes place hours before the opening credit roll of Star Wars Episode 4. And they do a brilliant job connecting a lot of events and setting up almost everything that happens in Episode 4 and some things that do happen in Episode 6.
Yeah.
However, like most of a lot of the things Abrams is involved in some way, the first act is a little weak. And it's very chaotic. So
yeah, as someone who wasn't I mean, you probably knew more what was going on.
Yeah.
It was only until afterward I knew what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But when you're watching it for the first time, it can be confusing.
There are a bunch of characters that are introduced at the very beginning, and they go through things that it seems like we're supposed to care about, but we, having no knowledge of these characters, don't particularly care about what's happening.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Once it gets into its second and third act, it's relatively smooth sailing from there, aside from some clunky writing, which Star Wars fans have gotten used to overlooking by this point.
Right. And one of my buddies, Sam, he said that it's an amazing hour-and-a-half film. It's a really, really good 2-hour film. So that because he's talking about the first act there.
Sure.
So now I want to get the thoughts here of a friend of mine, Mark, who does movie reviews. So
All right.
we'll bring him in here and get his thoughts since he had a even more critical perspective on this. So,
Sure.
Mark, are you there? Oh, we may have dropped him here.
Hey, this is Mark. I'm not in right now. Leave your name.
All right.
and seat,
He'll have to give us a
and
call
I'll get
back.
to you.
Wow.
So we lost
Wait till
him.
he was hanging.
Oh, here, it looks like he tried calling. Let's see here.
This is getting really confusing.
Mark, are you there? Hello?
Yes, that sounds like Kurt.
Hey, we're live
Hey,
on
there you
Veracity
go.
Hill. Thanks for calling in.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. I figured I'd give you a heads
my
up that
pleasure.
we were talking about Rogue One. I know you've put out a blog post with your review. Now, as we've mentioned, this is supposed to be a brief spoiler-free discussion, Mark. So, as best you can, without spoiling anything for people that haven't seen it, tell us what were your thoughts about the film?
Well, and I am a Star Wars fan, going back as most every 9-year-old boy ends up becoming.
Yeah.
I was excited to see it and a little honestly disappointed, and I hope I don't lose any friends or followers for this. But my feelings of it were, well, it was nicely well made and stuff. They did mention it was supposed to be what was called a standalone, but they brought in
Right.
a few cameos or Easter eggs, if you will, of characters that you'll know. And while some of them were minor, which I was okay with, there were some major ones which I was like, really, why were they there? And I won't go into saying who they are, but there were also some parts where you expect it to be in a Star Wars movie and it wasn't, and including one very specific thing at the beginning of the movie, which I won't say, but
Right.
it
Right. I hear you, Mark.
just didn't. It ended up really making me feel a lot more upset than I thought I would be.
Ah.
Also to the fact that there was the music was done for the first time not by John Williams.
That's
who
right,
I'm
yeah.
a humongous
Michael
fan of.
Giacchino, right?
But yeah, thank you for pronouncing that name. I wasn't going to be able to. But yeah, he did a fair job with the music and whatnot. But I mean, John Williams is John Williams. There's
Right.
no one
Sure.
near his level of talent. So for my blog, my website, which was I do it out of 5 stars. I gave it a 2.5,
Ooh.
which isn't necessarily saying it was bad or horrible. It's really far, and it's in the middle. But if I had to pick positive or negative, it would be a slight negative
Ah.
as well.
Yes, Mark
as
is
well.
one
It
of those
wasn't the
critical
worst Star
film
Wars
reviewers.
I ever saw.
What was that, Mark?
I was saying it wasn't the worst Star Wars movie I've ever seen. For me, that's still Episode 2 or Episode 1, one of those two. And but it wasn't as good as Force Awakens in my mind. So
Gotcha. Okay, I know that discussion
but-
is going on right now on social media where people have that. Hey, Mark, we've got to get to our next segment, but thanks so much for calling in. And if you want to read more about Mark's film reviews, you can go to checkmarkedfilmreviews.com. Thanks, Mark.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, sir. You guys have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, so thank you to Mark for coming on and talking about his view on Rogue One there. He definitely has more of the critical reviews if you check out his website,
Yeah.
but I appreciate that. It's not just the regular website where he just says, oh, hey, this is a great review, and he says about pretty much any movie he sees, which you certainly get that out there. For me, Chris, you mentioned this. Like you said, it takes place in the hours preceding up to Episode 4.
Yeah.
Now, some of the things that would not be ruining the spoilers are, because if you've seen the trailer, then you see. So Darth Vader is in the film,
Sure.
which is great. He's got a really good scene as well in that film.
Sure.
And also, I put on Facebook as a joke that I put major spoiler alert, and then I go down and I write they get the plans to the Death Star.
Yeah.
And I don't think some people realize that I was joking, but that's the whole premise of the film. And of course, you know they have the plans to the Death Star if you've seen episode 4.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
So I do apologize to any people perhaps that didn't understand that, that I was joking about that. At any rate, very good film. Yes, I haven't staked a claim about if it's better than The Force Awakens or not. Chris, what are your thoughts? And then we'll get to the main segment of the show.
Whether or not it's better, I'd say it's not as good. I'd say it's not as good. It's good. It's better than any of the episodes 1, 2, and 3. And what it's supposed to do, it does very well. But it suffers from some Act 1 problems and some clunky writing. Other than that,
Sure.
it's watchable. You can spend money today, and you will not be disappointed. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Awesome. Well, so let's move on over then to the main segment of today's show. We are
Yes.
talking about Christianity and philosophy. And we have the deep pleasure, and those that are watching here on Facebook Live on our Facebook page, they can see that we have printed an image of a smiling Dr. Tim McGrew. This is something that we're going to try doing new every week here.
We're going to have a Tim McGrew every time we have a speaker.
Boy, I wish. No, we are going to do our best to print up an image of our guests so that way you can know what the person looks like that you hear talking on the phone line. So, without further ado, let me invite Dr. McGrew to join us here. Dr. McGrew, thanks so much.
Hi, Kurt. Good to be here.
Great. Okay, so you are a professor of philosophy at Western Michigan University. You are a genius, pretty much, if I say so, and if I say that, I say it modestly. And so,
Okay, that got awkward fast.
you are able to go into some very deep philosophical issues, especially in epistemology, which is your specialty, that is just so far over many people's heads. But as someone myself, I've studied philosophy as an undergrad. I certainly can appreciate the importance of doing those things. And so maybe some people don't appreciate that, and we'll get into that discussion a little bit here in a few moments about what philosophy is and such. And so you've been there in Michigan for a long time. You're also the director of the Library of Historical Apologetics. Tell us a little bit about, for those that are unfamiliar with that, tell us a little bit about the library.
Sure. The library is located at historicalapologetics.org. You can also find us on Facebook. Just look up Library of Historical Apologetics. It's our goal to be the clearinghouse for forgotten works of apologetics that really deserve to be reclaimed, things that have been unjustly neglected. And we have those available for downloading. We have summaries. We have some discussions of some of the figures and some of the works. So if you go to historicalapologetics.org and poke around a little bit, you'll see some of that material. And that is really our kind of gift to the Christian community, because there's so much wonderful stuff back there that people really need to rediscover. Every single time I get somebody reading one of these old books, I hear back, wow, why didn't I find this years ago?
Yeah.
And this is changing my life. So it's really good stuff.
I know we recently had, I think, a mutual Facebook friend. He's also a Cubs fan, JW. He recently posted about how he's been reading up on your website, and he doesn't have the time to read all of this beautiful stuff that he's finding. So he needs to create time, I guess, but he's really enjoying what he is reading there. So now let me also make mention of this, and I'll do it again later. We're going to be giving away a USB flash drive, 8 gigabyte flash drive, with a lot of data here from the library, a number of Dr. McGrew's talks, and just some of these great PDF files from this bygone era. And it even has LHA's, as I call it, LHA's logo. So we're going to be giving that away for free. So pay attention to our Facebook page for instructions on how to win that in the next coming days here. Okay.
And this is how exclusive this is. I haven't even seen the logo on the drive. So Kurt is really giving you guys first dibs on it.
Yes, and to our Facebook Live fans here, I will go ahead and show it up to the camera. In fact, I can even put it right there on my top of my computer there. All right, and Chris will do his magic. Yep. Okay, so we brought you on here today, even though we've got to bring you on just to talk about historical apologetics. That's not what we're talking about today, and some of that's because we've got this new book out called 4 Views on Christianity and Philosophy, and it's a fascinating book. I was able to read a couple chapters here in preparation, and so I've got some questions for you. Some of them are going to be maybe a bit basic, more than the type of questions you're used to, Tim. So first, I wanted to start off with asking the question, what is philosophy? And I ask this because a number of us know kind of what Christianity is, right? Christianity is for people that believe that Jesus is Lord and they follow his teachings, and perhaps there's some entailments there about Orthodox Christian doctrine, right? What's the relationship between orthodoxy, which is right belief, and orthopraxy, which is right practice? But a lot of Christians do not know, even still, what philosophy is. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Literally, the word philosophy means the love of wisdom. And that's what people chose as a description of it when they were identifying what it was they were doing. In the ancient world, philosophy was not separated out as a discipline from things like natural science and psychology. And so if you were a philosopher, you did all of that. And as time went by, some of those disciplines sort of peeled off and became their own thing, especially if there were some experimental methods that could help us to answer certain questions in them. But today, it's a discipline in which we attempt to answer extremely deep and important questions in a way that's conceptually precise and argumentatively rigorous. So we try to make it very, very clear what we're saying, make distinctions very, very sharply, and try to reason things out as far as we possibly can.
And so, in that sense, when we understand philosophy that way, we just understand it, broadly speaking, it provides the tools for thinking rigorously, analytically, critically, and even still clearly about everything in life. And so
it does, but it does so at a level. I mean, questions tend to cluster, and some of the clusters have this peculiar property that the answers you give to those questions will affect the answers you give to a whole bunch of other questions.
Yeah, and it seems
Who
that,
am I? Why am I here? What am I? What's the meaning of life? Those questions, you get answers to those, right answers or wrong answers, and they will place a lot of constraints on the answers you give to other questions. What should I be doing today?
Yeah.
The very day-to-day practical kinds of questions turn out to be rooted in, sometimes subconsciously, we don't even realize it, but these things are rooted in very deep philosophical commitments. And so, and philosophy also provides us historically with a selection of those deep questions. And a lot of what philosophers do is to come back to those questions and try to make progress on those perennial questions, the questions that have always bothered people have always wondered about.
Right, and at least in my experience, when I've met philosophers, at least Christian philosophers, I shall say, they tend to be some of the most humble and yet winsome people I've ever met, because they study a lot, so they've learned how much it is that they don't know. And so maybe from the from the little bit that they do know, they share what they have. But go ahead. What were you thinking, Tim?
I was just going to say, there's nothing like studying a discipline like philosophy for making you realize how much you don't know and how hard some of the natural questions are. And if you're attempting to answer them on your own, if you're out there just saying, okay, I'm looking around, I'm trying to be up on my recent science, I'd like to know something about history, and I'm going to try to use the data from science and history and experience and try to make progress on a really, really deep question. It's not like nobody's tried before. And so it's kind of humbling to realize, wow, there are superb geniuses throughout thousands of years who have tried to make headway on this, and here's little old me trying to follow in those gigantic footprints.
Right. Yeah, it's not only just the contemporary discussions in philosophy, but I mean, you have the whole history that you perhaps should start with, and that just takes a really long time to understand and grasp. And yeah, it's just there's a vast array of perspectives in the history of philosophy. So yeah, it can be a very humbling experience to do that study. So,
no doubt.
So some of my interest here in talking about philosophy is to help Christians understand why it's important. So why should Christians care about philosophy?
for many reasons. Christianity offers answers to some of those deep and important questions. So that's one reason right there. You're in this conversation already. You may not know it, but you are. You're already engaging with issues that Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas and Descartes and Kant and Hume had thought about and had opinions about and wrote about. So you might as well do it in a way that is engaged and do it not sleepwalking, but with your eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is that bad answers exist, and those bad answers are extremely popular. So someone needs to understand the discipline, if only to answer bad philosophy. And this is important because philosophy, whether it's done well or done poorly, tends gradually to take over large segments of culture. And so you'll find people acting in accordance with ideas that would have been put forward by, say, Nietzsche. They have maybe no idea that these are Nietzsche's ideas, but they seem to them to be very natural, obvious, correct, and if those are ideas inimical to Christianity, which many of Nietzsche's ideas, of course, are, then they're moving according to a set of unwritten marching orders that gets filtered down into the culture through media, through movies, through art, and if you're not aware of that, you can't fully understand what's going on or why it's happening, and that will make you less effective in engaging with that culture.
It's interesting that you talk about ineffectiveness, and I've certainly seen that in my discussions. I think a number of Christians are perhaps insecure because they're not prepared. They're not ready to answer some of those objections from the philosophers, the non-Christian philosophers. And what I mean by that is sort of what you said, Tim, that it's not necessarily the philosophers that they're dealing with, but the arguments that the philosophers made, but now have been disseminated to the masses, sometimes over decades, maybe 100 years even, and it takes over culture. It becomes a really popular notion. And so we sort of see, and correct me if I'm mistaken, since you're an academic, we see a sort of a lag time, if you will. So it usually takes, the writing in academia to occur, and then the influence doesn't happen overnight. If you just had to give a ballpark, how long would you say, based on your observations, it takes some philosophical notion in the ivory tower to make it down the stairs to the masses?
It really varies. It depends on how prepared the culture has been, how softened up, if I can put it that way, it's been for the reception of the idea. But it could be anywhere from 15 years to 100 years. But there is a tether for each idea that culture bounces along behind the philosophy at some distance or other, and usually, if the conditions are right, it'll end up being so pervasive that people won't even think of it as a philosophical position. They'll simply say, well, this is obvious, right? I mean, take common slogans, right? Well, it's wrong to impose your beliefs on others.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a philosophical claim. It doesn't sound like it, though, right? It just sounds like one of those things that everybody knows. Everybody knows that that's true. And it's so hard to engage with something like that without creativity and understanding. If somebody just throws that at you, your first reaction is likely to be, wow, what do I say now? And that's why it's important for there to be at least some people who think about these things and ask these questions and come up with clear, well-formulated answers that make sense and can be defended, because that can enable people who aren't themselves professional philosophers to engage more effectively with their friends, their coworkers, their neighbors, their fellow college students. And that is something that we really don't do very well on the whole. There are some wonderful exceptions, but on the whole, we're not doing very well with that in Christian culture in the 21st century. We need to get better at it.
Yeah, I know for some people, they take certain passages from the Bible as a sort of mandate for everyone to be an apologist. Always be prepared to give a defense for the hope that's within. Now, I don't think that every person should be a high-level apologist, if you will, or even a medium-level apologist. But if we had an apologist in every church, shall we say, someone that was well-read enough, who may not be an academic, him or herself, but can read it and interpret it and understand it and then communicate that to the lay level, I think that would be a good thing, because then I know I've attended churches where they were not following right belief. They were not following in alignment with the scriptures, and so that's why we need apologists. One of the reasons why is to guard the faith, as we see in the New Testament. So there is definitely an importance there to study philosophy at a certain level, and maybe if we're not reading the philosophers ourselves, we're reading the people that have read the philosophers. So that's important to still do that, because Tim, as you mentioned, whether we know it or not, we're doing philosophy. And so it's really important that we understand a bit more about what it is we're doing when we are discussing, when we're thinking, when we're communicating and talking to people. So we've got to take a short break here. This has really been good so far, Tim. We'll take a short break from our sponsors, and then when we get back, we'll get more into the book, The Four Views on Christianity and Philosophy.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
People are talking a lot about healthcare these days. There are so many changes, so many questions. As Christians, where can we turn for answers? Well, at Samaritan Ministries, we believe the answer is in Jesus Christ, working in the lives of His people, demonstrating Christian community by sharing each other's medical needs, scripturally, faithfully. Here's just part of Lana's story in her own words.
I love getting the monthly share that I give to each month that has a name of a real person and their real medical concerns and a prayer request, for them. That I get to interact with people from all over the country, just like me, and get to pray for them and know that they're praying for me when I have a need. It's great. I love it.
Lana is just one of over 200,000 members who are sharing over $23 million in medical needs each month. If you'd like to experience what it's like to partner with other Christians for your healthcare needs, and you'd like to see what other members are saying, visit mysamaritanstory.org.
All right, thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. And I'm here today with Dr. Tim McGrew, and today we are discussing Christianity and philosophy. But before we get back into that, it is time for one of the favorite segments of our show called Rapid Questions. And this is a segment of the show where we ask short, lighthearted questions, and we want fast responses. Are you ready, Tim?
All right, let's go.
Okay, here we go. What is your clothing store of choice?
JCPenney.
Taco Bell or KFC?
KFC.
What school did you go to?
Vanderbilt.
What is your favorite sport?
Chess.
What fruit would you say your head is shaped like?
I wouldn't.
What's your most hated sports franchise?
Don't have one.
Do you drink Dr. Pepper?
Yes.
Where would you like to live?
Right here in Michigan.
Which celebrity are you most like?
Steve Martin.
The Hokey Pokey, Electric Slide, or the Macarena?
None of the above. I'll take a Pavone.
Left or right?
Right. The alternative seems so sinister.
What is your spouse's favorite holiday?
Anyone that puts us together. Probably anniversary would do.
Anniversary. And the last question I have for you is, are you a Cubs fan?
I am.
All right. Yes, I saw that you were, during this last playoff run for the Chicago Cubs, my beloved Cubs, I saw that you sort of got in the spirit, and glad to see that you are rooting for the Cubs. I think we almost got your whole family in on it, huh?
You did. Lydia grew up in Chicago, of course, and so
Yeah.
she remembers her grandfather waiting through season after season for the Cubs to win.
I don't know when her grandfather lived. My grandfather lived his whole life and never saw the Cubs win. So that's just a reminder of how long it had been since the Cubs had won. All right.
108.
All right. Yes, that's right. So not anymore. Now it's 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get back to our discussion here about Christianity and philosophy. So we've got this recent book that's come out. I think it's Zondervan, right? I haven't double checked that.
Mm-hmm.
They do the four views. They do a wonderful series on issues for people that are unfamiliar with different perspectives on any given theological issue. They put out some great books on these topics. And so it's a great way to expose yourself in a good way to different views and to see the counterpoints, because the way this is formatted is each contributor gets a chapter. There are replies by the other contributors, and then there's sort of a closing response or a rejoinder by that person to those criticisms. So it's a great format. So we've got this book here, Tim, and before we get into your perspective, I want to ask sort of what are the four perspectives represented here about the relationship between Christianity and philosophy?
Well, the best way for you to get that answer would be for you to ask the other contributors themselves. But since you're asking me, Graham Oppy represents the agnostic naturalist who suspects there is no God, thinks that every aspect of our experience, everything that might count as data, is explained at least equally well by a universe that's purely naturalistic. The only items that can cause things to happen are things that are studied by natural science. So there's no God, no angels, no demons, no human soul. There's literally nothing in heaven and earth that is not dreamt of in his philosophy. That's how he likes it. Paul Moser takes a position that I think lies closest to Christian mysticism. In his view, the natural world does not afford the slightest evidence for God's existence or attributes. But God communicates himself to every individual in a direct and very intimate fashion and invites us by this personal experience into a relationship with himself. Scott Oliphant endorses a special brand of Reformed epistemology known as presuppositionalism. His view, if I understand him, is that every single thing is evidence for God if viewed in Christian perspective. But no one sees it as evidence for God unless he's already accepted that Christianity is true, that the Bible is God's word, and that the Reformed creeds provide the proper articulation of Christian theology. So it's very much a, colored glasses on, colored glasses off kind of thing. You really can't see it until you've already bought into it, according to Scott Oliphant.
Right. And it seems that then Moser's and Oliphant's positions are close, but they are distinct. Is that right?
There a lot of sparks fly as we try to figure out where we stand relative to one another, and so it would surprise you how different three Protestant guys who want to take Scripture seriously can be.
Yeah. Okay, so your position here, what's called the convergence. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think that philosophy confirms Christianity and that Christianity completes philosophy. I think the study of philosophy done properly shows us reasons to believe that there is a God, the creator of the universe, an intelligent, designing mind who's taken thought for our well-being. If that much is true, then of course it becomes our highest priority to find out more about God, more about who he is, more about what our proper relationship is to him. But on the other side, I think Christianity completes philosophy because some of those deep questions philosophers are concerned with can't be answered fully, and some of them can't be answered at all without a revelation from God to man. I'm persuaded by the public evidence that Christianity is the fullest expression of that revelation, and without it, we can't answer those critical questions.
So, how would you say then that that philosophy confirms Christianity? What is it about philosophy that makes any contribution then to the Christian worldview?
Well, you remember that I said that Christianity makes certain claims about some of those deep questions, right? I think that philosophy shows us that Christianity is not simply a fascinating story that somebody invented out of the back of his head. It gives us reasons to believe that it is, in broad outline, on the right kind of track, even though Christianity is far more specific, gives us far more details than unassisted philosophical reflection can arrive at. And what that means is that people who've never thought of Christianity before, maybe have never heard of Christianity before, still have some resources that should give them the sense that this Christianity thing, this could be the real deal. This is not some fantasy that's unconnected with the data of our experience. Several of the clues that we have available to us in experience point in this direction. Once you get that far, you have to make a choice, because Christianity is going to put claims on you. If it's true, then you're not your own person. Your life isn't your own to live as you like. It is, from a non-Christian perspective, rather inconvenient. And that's a test, then, of your integrity. In philosophy, we talk a lot about following the argument wherever it leads. That's a very important aspect of philosophical culture. It goes way back, of course, to Plato's dialogues about Socrates. And so once you realize, wow, there's a certain amount of evidence pointing in the same direction as this Christianity stuff, then you have to decide whether you're willing to follow up on that, even if it means you're going to have to give up some things that you're rather attached to. And that is a test of character, and I think things are set up this way deliberately, and there's certainly enough evidence, but we can choose not to follow the evidence. I had a guy tell me once, after a whole night of arguing, we started at 11 o'clock and we ended as the sun rose, and he just stared at me. He said, "I can't answer your arguments." And then he shook his head and he said, "But it just won't wash with me." It wasn't that he had seen through the arguments and had bulletproof answers to them. It was that he didn't want to go where the argument was going.
Yeah,
Well,
that seems
okay.
Yeah, in apologetics, certainly apologetics is both a science and an art. And some of the science is the arguments. Some of the art is recognizing where people are at, because for some people, they just don't want to believe. And those are the people that you won't win over because they've already made up their decision. There's nothing you can say, even if what you're speaking is absolutely true, that will force them to bend their knee to Jesus. They might think that Jesus is Lord, but so do the demons. And so the question is whether people will bend their knee, whether they will submit to his authority over their life. And that's a difficult thing, right? It's a difficult thing to be a Christian, to take up your cross daily, to put to death the desires of the flesh. It's a hard thing, and some people are not up to the challenge. And so, Tim, I know you've probably had interactions like this. Part of the experience for us is in helping that distinction be made clear, because some people are going to put on the intellectual objections as a mask, a forefront to the reality, which is that they just don't want to, because of whatever other reasons they might have. Perhaps they're living in sin and they enjoy doing those things and they don't want to modify their behavior, for example. Yes, right. So now, I guess maybe my initial question to you, Tim, wasn't super precise. Forgive me, I'm not a philosopher. So when we talk about how philosophy confirms Christianity, could you be a bit more specific? So what are some certain things in philosophy, say natural theology is just one branch of theology that philosophy makes a larger contribution to than, say, New Testament studies, for example? So what are some things that you see philosophers talking about when they're talking about natural theology?
So this is a branch of the philosophy of religion, and it deals with arguments for and against the existence of God. So can you infer the existence of a powerful creator of the universe from what you know about the physical universe, or what you can determine from it? Can you infer the existence of an intelligent creator of the universe from, say, aspects of design that are found in the cosmos at various levels, and people have then work these arguments out in detail in different levels about different things, whether the fundamental constants of the universe are fine-tuned, whether there's design in, say, the existence of carbon resonance, which permits the formation of carbon, which is the basis for all biological diversity in life that we know. There's a whole bunch of different arguments from design, the cosmological argument. There are versions of those arguments. There are moral arguments, arguments from consciousness, arguments from reason. And then there are arguments against the existence of God, and I think good philosophical reflection can help to put those in their place and show the limitations of their force, like the problem of evil. Why would a good God, if there were a good God, permit so much pain and suffering and wretchedness and evil as we find around us? And not only that we find some, but that we find such scope and variation of suffering. How could a good God allow that? And I think that that's a problem that philosophy can make some progress on.
Yeah, and so for philosophers, when they're talking about this, they're not specifically referring to the Christian God, at least yet. Is that right, or how does that usually work?
Right. So, well, I mean, if I refer to a guy who lives in Chicago, I haven't given enough detail to specify you, right? I haven't said your name. I haven't said that you have a podcast called Veracity Hill. I could say those things, and that would narrow it right down. But that doesn't mean I'm not talking about you if I'm talking about a guy in Chicago. I might be.
Right.
We just don't know which guy in Chicago yet, right? So philosophers talk about a first cause, a designing mind, a conscious intelligence, and those are all true descriptions of the Christian God, but they're incomplete.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that I say in the book that Christianity completes philosophy, because once we get that far, we want to know more. Okay, well, what's that God like? Hey, let's come over and have a look at what Christianity has to say about that and whether Christianity itself is rationally credible.
And then at the same time, once we do come to Christian belief, then we can almost look back and say, yes, that's the one we're talking about when we are bringing these arguments from natural theology.
I think that's exactly right, but we don't do that just by saying, oh, here's a God, I think I'll guess that that's the one. There are actual concrete reasons to take the more specific claims of Christianity seriously. And boy, that evidence is evidence I wish that I could get into the hands of everyone who has to think about these issues at all, which is nearly everybody.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons that we run the Historical Apologetics website. So I'm glad you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, of course. So now I do have a question, because I've interacted with an atheist on Facebook from time to time, and he's not too fond of philosophy. I think he misunderstands philosophy. But one of the sort of line of arguments, if you will, that he uses, which is just ironic because of what philosophy is and his perspective on it. He says that, well, sort of arguments, they're just semantics. So like maybe the claim is that, say, the cosmological argument is sort of circular reasoning, that you're just assuming the conclusion that there is a God when we need to leave it up to science to see what's beyond, if you will. So what would you say to someone like that who is not too fond of deductive arguments and think that they're just semantical word games?
I usually ask, okay, give me an example of a version of an argument for the existence of God, an argument in natural theology. You pick whether you want this to be cosmological, teleological, that's been presented by a respectable professional who's trying to put it in its best light, and then let's assess this in detail. I find very often people who make quips like that have never engaged with any positive presentation of the case. What they've engaged with are caricatures that other skeptics have put forward. And it's very easy to misrepresent a view. It's easy to misrepresent atheism and to laugh at what you've presented as the view without ever really engaging with the reasons that make people hesitate to come over and join your side. And so when I hear really facile, very simple, oh, it's all so simple, everybody who believes this other thing is an idiot, really? I don't think all atheists are idiots.
Yeah.
Why would anybody think that all Christians are idiots? Oh, they're not. They're just blinded by cognitive bias. Is cognitive bias only for religious believers? Or do atheists also have problems with cognitive bias? Let's be even-handed here, right? I mean, there are some things that are problems, but they're usually everybody's problems.
Right.
And if they are everybody's problems, then it's not fair for us to dismiss all alternative viewpoints to our own, but then isolate our own from that arbitrarily. That just doesn't work.
Yeah, and so there's that challenge for non-Christians to understand us and our beliefs correctly, but there's also the challenge that we have to our brothers and sisters in Christ to make sure they are understanding what a person is saying and presenting, and we then should perhaps be charitable to what they might have to say so that we can understand what they are trying to say, and so we don't strawman them or attack them. So that's very important. So
right.
Philosophy presents...
And it's very easy... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so philosophy presents that challenge to both sides.
It does, and it's very easy to misunderstand people. That's one of the reasons that I like the format of this Four Views book so much. Everybody has the same opportunity to state the case for your own position. Then each of the contributors has the chance to write a pointed critique of each of the other main positions, and then each contributor has the chance to address the critiques of his own position by the other contributor. So it's really an opportunity to try to come to mutual understanding as much as is possible.
Within one book.
And that is a really valuable thing.
Yeah, within one book, because as you know, I mean, you can only say so much. And so it's like,
yeah.
Well, if you could write, a volume, an encyclopedia volume on everything that was written in that short book. So, but Zondervan tries, and it's still worthwhile. It's a great primer, if you will, for the differing perspectives. So, with those differing perspectives, Tim, tell us, what do you think are some of your biggest concerns with the three views other than your own?
Okay, so really briefly, Oppie thinks that the public evidence points toward naturalism rather than towards theism, much less Christianity. Moser dismisses appeals to the public evidence. In his view, that doesn't yield any significant reason to believe in a God worthy of worship. And he puts all his eggs in the existential encounter basket. Oliphant denies that anyone except a Christian can evaluate the evidence correctly. Each of those things is, I think, wrong, but they're reacting to something right. They're just taking it too far, or taking it as if it were the whole thing. So I would grant to Oppie, for example, that there are some pieces of evidence which, if you consider them in isolation, seem to point toward naturalism. But it's not our responsibility to jump to a conclusion on the basis of a casual glance. We need to assess all of the evidence that we can and form a conclusion based on a careful consideration of all of that. And that evidence is very rich. It's much richer than most skeptics like Oppie, or even most Christians, commonly believe. I agree with Moser that Christianity involves more than just intellectual assent to propositions. We are being called to a relationship with our Creator. But an intense private religious experience is something else. Some people claim to have those, and for all I know, they do. But the rest of us aren't in on that. And I think that it's really a mistake to say, as Moser seems to say, that those experiences are normative for all Christians, and if you don't have them, you're not a Christian. And speaking as someone who's never had such an experience, I'm very grateful for the abundance of public evidence, evidence that I think Moser severely underestimates. Of course, not everybody is willing to look at the evidence, and Oliphant is making much of that. He's right if all he says is that this is a difficulty where we have biases, we're apt not to look carefully at evidence against our own positions. But in my opinion, he exaggerates that very real difficulty into an impossibility. I think many people are able to come to an understanding of the reasonableness of Christianity on the basis of public evidence. I think they can overcome their biases, and they can see past those things. I'd like to persuade Oliphant that this is true as well, but he has a theory that blocks him from that, and I think that is a problem. It's a very grave thing to say that people who apparently are trying to seek the truth are actually completely opposed to finding it.
Right, right. And almost as if there's a there are certain theological positions, at least for Moser and for Oliphant, that would serve as an influence to their view. Wouldn't you say?
Philosophical and theological positions,
Yeah.
both, right? For example, we disagree on the interpretation of Romans chapter 1.
Yeah, right.
I think it's perfectly obvious that Paul is making an argument from creation there, or alluding to such an argument, which he expects his readers to recognize and to accept. And Moser and Oliphant, against the very substantial majority of commentators on Romans, want to say, no, nothing to see here. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Move along.
Excellent Star Wars reference. Yes. So it does get down, and I've had a number of theological debates throughout my my studies. For some people, even, while I think that theological and philosophical arguments should convince Christians, sometimes if it may still just boil down to their interpretation of the text, they're willing to hold their ground because they think the text says X, and so they're unwilling to do that until you get into those discussions about the text. And you guys do that in these chapters in the interaction. So it's at least a testament to the authority of Scripture, shall we say, for Christians, that it plays such an important role in our worldview forming, that it's also then very important that we're interpreting the text in the right way.
It certainly should be.
Yeah, right. Great. Dr. McGrew, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and to talk about this book. We've got to bring you back on to talk about the Library of Historical Apologetics. And before you go, let me make 2 announcements regarding LHA. So again, we've got this USB flash drive. It's an 8 gigabyte flash drive full of data from the library, talks that Tim has given. I think even some of your PowerPoint presentations are on here. We're going to be giving away this flash drive for free, so stay tuned to the Veracity Hill Facebook page to learn about those details. And if you don't win, let me tell you about this great opportunity. So the library currently has a 50% matching grant opportunity available to them. So that's to say, if you donate $1, they will then get an extra 50 cents from a generous foundation. So if you give $20, they will get a total of $30. So right now, here's a great opportunity to support their work, because your donation will then be halved as much, added on top of your donation. But Defenders is throwing in this incentive for you as well. To any sustaining monthly donor of $10 or more, we're going to send you the flash drive for free. So if you want to start supporting the library, you'll get this flash drive full of data, 8 gigabytes, with LHA's logo. You can show your friends what a great ministry that it is to you and to others. So please consider donating to Dr. McGrew's ministry there, and check out the website at historicalapologetics.org. Tim, thanks so much again for joining us, and we hope to have you on soon.
Love to.
Bye-bye. Okay, so that's really a great primer to this book here, to the different views, the different perspectives on Christianity and philosophy. And so really, I think you should check it out if you've got the opportunity. For our Facebook Live here, I'm going to show you the book here once again, what it looks like with the 4 contributors. And again, if you aren't aware of this series, this style of counterpoints, you need to check out Zondervan, because they've got some great books on that. So now I get to play this favorite tune here that I like to play when someone writes into the show. Here we go.
All right.
Okay, so that means someone has written into the show. Here we've got Michael. He writes in that he's still trying to figure out, he writes, I'm still trying to figure out what you are. Not an Arminian, not a Molinist, not a Calvinist, but maybe between an Arminian and a Molinist. Well, Michael,
A lot of words in there, Kurt.
Yeah, a lot of words. So for those that are, we're coming to an end. I've got to keep it brief here. So we had a show with Jerry Walls, who represented the Arminian view, and he had some criticism against the Calvinist view. We've got to bring on a Calvinist to just bring in the counter perspective there. Basically, these debates get into how God predestines people or elects them. And so some of them base this decision on foreknowledge. So the Molinist view is sort of a complex view of that. I don't associate myself with any of those three camps. Some of it's for a number of reasons. Let me just explain two of those reasons. First, I hold to a different theological anthropology. I know it's a big term. I hold to a different view of the nature of man than what you find in the Reformed tradition, from which you get Calvinists, and then also even Arminians are part of that Reformed tradition. Now, Molinists, Luis de Molina, he was a Jesuit priest, so that's sort of a Catholic position, but it's not exclusive to Catholicism. At any rate, so I don't associate with those three for the reason regarding human nature, but also on election. So I hold to what's called the corporate election view. And I think an individual is elect insofar as they are part of the corporate group. This is close to, I wouldn't say it's identical with, close to the view that N.T. Wright talks about. One scholar who's really been great on this issue for me, his name is Brian Abbasiano. And so if you're interested, you want to see those articles that I've read that have influenced my thinking on the matter, go ahead and send me an email and I can send those your way. So my email is kurt@veracityhill.com. Again, that's Kurt, K-U-R-T, @veracityhill.com, and I can send those to you. So, Michael, maybe that's why you have found that I'm difficult to put into a camp. I'm a happy Protestant, but some of my views are close to the Eastern Orthodox Church on this issue, and maybe they're not identical to the Eastern Orthodox Church, to their view. I'm still exploring it. That's part of the reason why I like studying theology. I'm trying to figure this out on my own. But in community, I should say, in theological community. You should never study theology in isolation. But that is to say, how typical of a Protestant that we should sort of figure this out again. I do recognize church tradition, and in fact, a lot of my work is studying the church fathers. So I do have an appreciation there as well. Good. All right. So, Michael, thanks for writing in. If you want to write in, again, you can just send me an email. We've got a contact form on the website. You can also text me, or you can call into the show at any time, whether we are live or if it's during the week and you just want to leave a message to me. You can call the number. It's 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. So that does it for the show today. I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons. So what are our patrons? Chris, you've heard it enough times. Patrons are enough people that chip in just a few bucks a month to help us out, to make they are the oil to this machine. I'm also grateful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors: Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, and Evolution 2.0. And thank you to the tech team. Chris, that's you today. I appreciated the discussion on Rogue One.
Sure.
I kind of feel like we saw it late, so I kind of feel like maybe we should go see it again, because I realized, boy, I was tired. I think I could enjoy it if I weren't so tired. We went and saw what is, functionally speaking, the midnight showing.
Yeah.
I guess that means I'm getting old.
Maybe
when I get tired. And you had an appointment at 7 a.m. Did you make it there?
I did make it there.
Ooh, beautiful. Yeah. Nice. Well done. All right. So thank you today for the work that you do, and thanks to our special guest, Dr. Tim McGrew, for coming in to talk about Christianity and philosophy. And thank you for listening in and striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.